anyway, go back to 2014. All these people are meditating. Antarel's in the forest. They find Antarel, they come back, and they tell Paul, are you ready? And she's just like freaking out. And he's leading her across, and it's like pitch dark. I mean, you can't believe how dark it gets there. And it's like there's rocks and there's stuff, and they're tripping over stuff, and they're all holding on each other so they don't fall down. So they go there, and Ricardo tells them, what happens with these Xendras is they put 7 people in at a time. And there's some that can put 12, but usually it's 7 people at a time going in this Xendra. So the 7 people are picked, and that's what they do. So the rest of these people are still oming. They stay in the thing, and they support the group. And I can't believe that you say, well, I want to go. You know, I want to go to the Xendra. I don't want to sit here and ohm or whatever. But these people actually do. They sit there and they continue to ohm and meditate and keep up the vibration. And then the 7 people head off across this sand plain, heading for where Raimundo had found Antarel. They know exactly where he is, in the forest. So they go there, and this whole event takes place, and they have when Sixto Paz did the interview with us yesterday, he said there was 4 different types of Xendras, and he was describing it. I didn't really listen to it, but there's 4 different types. But this type, it's this white, bluish white fog comes up from the ground. And so Paula told me in 2015, she told me that there was these women beside them, and they had to hold hands. So they would hold hands, and they were told, do not let go of anybody's hand beside you until you're over the fog. You have to hang on. So then they walk across the fog, and then they let go. And Paula said it was the most scary moment of her life when she had let go of people's hands. So they get let go. And I think what it is, I have to do more research, but I think what it is the minute you let go of everybody's hands, it's an individual experience. Because what I've found by researching these is that if you talk to 7 people in the Xendra, everybody gets a different message. Like Paula said, he's talking in this strange language, and I couldn't understand what he was saying. And it was like a bullhorn. And then she was kind of frustrated. Like, they said they didn't hear him, but I heard him. He was talking. But they got messages as well. It's almost like he's having 7 individual experiences with these people. So Paula gets taken into the Xendra, and she's standing there, and she's looking up at this guy. And I said to her on the tape, if you go to Whitehouse UFO YouTube, you'll see that she takes me there. We go across the field, and I'm filming her, and she goes across the field, and she's saying, we're standing by this little tree where she was, and he was right there against that tree. And so she goes through the whole story, and then I say to her, I said to her, was it an honor? And she goes, no, I don't know. I don't know what the protocol was. I have no idea what I was supposed to be doing. And she's describing this whole thing about, and then at the very end he says, thank you. He said like a robot. And that's all she remembered, but the rest of the voice she couldn't understand what he was talking about. So we go across the field, this is this year, just before my event, I'm going across, and I said, because I said to her, Paula, where did that thing happen? Show me where that thing happened. She said, come on. So I got the movie camera, okay, turn the movie camera on, she doesn't say no, so I keep the movie camera going, and across the field she explains this whole thing, and who was standing here, and then the important part was, Ricardo's wife, her name is Saul, they're married, right? And so Saul sees this big thing, and so Paula's here, no, there's a woman, there's Paula, there's Suyapa, she names and all these different people, where they were all standing on the thing. And then Saul is standing there, and she's going to walk up to this alien, and her husband yells out, don't touch him! And the alien puts his hand out like this, which is very important. The alien puts his hand out like this. And what that basically, I think, means is it's this interdimensional portal, Xendra, whatever you want to call it, in which they create an environment where if their vibration is higher, they can lower it, they can raise the vibration of the people, and you can interact. Which I was talking about in Laughlin, which basically comes down to there never may be a landing on the White House lawn, because they ain't the same, they're not on the same timeline, or they're at a different vibration. They can't even interact with us. And that's why he put his hand up to stay back. And he did it in 14 and 15. So she tells me this whole story and all this sort of stuff. And she's describing, this 15, she was locked up as well. And they actually brought a chair for her. And so they come across, they've got this lawn chair, so she can sit in, because she's just shaking, and they got a coat on her, and she's just freaking out. And the other people have seen it before. All these other Latino people have seen this guy before. So they're coming across, and then the guy that we did the interview, which we're going to put on Whitehouse UFO YouTube, it's an hour interview, which we were just playing coming into Laughlin. It's like, wow, you're listening to this guy, he's a business executive, semi-retired, he's pretty young, he's retired now, he's going back into business in Kansas City. And he's got the chair, so he's carrying the chair, but he's not really invited to the Xendra. And there's one guy who actually gets invited, doesn't get invited to the Xendra, but actually goes. So to tell you this idea of the circus, he says they go across. Paula's got his coat on. They're trying to calm her down, and they're leading her to her slaughter, or whatever, to the Xendra. And it's a little bit farther down the forest, on the edge of this forest, on this wide plain that's all open. So she goes there, and so Tom Hamblin says, they got to a certain point, and then Ricardo says, well, the people that are supposed to go back, you go back and meditate, or go back and do the oming and keep up the vibration. So he says it in Spanish, though. And so Tom says, Mary says, I wanted to go. I wanted to go in the worst way, man. I just wanted to go, but he said, I didn't know what the galactic protocol was. I knew I wasn't invited, so I couldn't go, but I wanted to go. And so off he says, and they take about 5 steps, he says, they're in the dark already. And they take off, and then he says, he's got this chair, and he's standing there, and then he says, I'm pretty sure he said I should go back, but then I didn't understand Spanish, so I'm just going to sit here. So he opens up the chair, and he sits in the middle of the field. So they head off, and he goes, and he's looking, he's going, they're going right into somebody's camp. And he says you could see this bluish white fog coming out. This blue light going up this tree. The tree is lit all the way up. Just this one tree, and it's bluish white. And he had a sighting in 2009, and he said, that's exactly the same color of the object I saw. It's exactly, the first thing he thought is, that's the same color. And then he saw this bluish white fog coming up. This is what Paul had described in 2014 coming off the ground. This white, bluish mist that lights up the forest. And then he said, and I was also looking, and he said it was like sparkles. All these sparkles in the forest. He said like the forest was alive. And he's sitting there, and then I said, so you just sat there, and he said, yeah. I said, so you didn't see anything? Oh no, I saw something. And he describes this thing, and then he starts to describe these people coming back as they come back, and the one guy's an architect, and he's gone off the record. And we can't publish his interview, but he told me off the record, 1 hour and 3/4. He said, I need 1 hour and 3/4 to tell you what happened to me. Because what happened is when he had the event, and it was the first time he'd ever been to Shasta, and he wasn't invited to the Xendra, but he was Paula's interpreter, and he was determined, I'm going to this thing, because he knew it had happened in 2014. So he goes out with them, and Tom Hamblin describes this guy coming back. He said, when I saw him, his face looked like he'd just experienced his first Christmas as a kid. He was just glowing. And he said, this is the circus part, he said, Tom, it's for real. There are people from other planets. I saw them. It's real. I saw them. There's people from other planets. And then Tom says, he looked like he just talked to God. And that was the thing that was just dramatic. It was like that dramatic. And this guy told me, when he told me the story, he said, that's just when it started. And then the beings are coming to the tent, and he goes home, and the wipers on his car, the car's turned off in the garage, and the wipers are going, and the water's shooting up and stuff like that, and all these bizarre, and he'd walk into the house, and the light bulb would blow up, and then his wife didn't like this whole thing. And the lights kept going, and his wife says, something's going on. And he said, yeah, it's got to do with what I saw. And she said, oh, it's just your Martians. And he said, they're not Martians. And they said this fight about the Martian thing, and then he actually sees Aunt Terrell in a party. He's in a party, and this 10-foot guy is sitting there, and he's looking around, and nobody else is looking at his Aunt Terrell, and his whole life is just totally upside down. And now he's got all these synchronicities and experiences. And on the weekend, we saw him on the weekend, just yesterday and the day before, we saw him, and again, he's all excited. He's going, I got to talk to you again. He says, all these things are happening. All these things are happening. And I said, okay, we'll call you again. He said, it's going to take me 2 hours to tell you what happened this weekend. So this guy's life is completely flipped upside down. So they come back, and they have this Xendra thing. So I'm going to write this thing up, because I got dragged in 2017. I go, now there's no Xendra, but there's this flashing thing that occurs exactly when they say these antennas predict 9:33. In fact, the woman, the psychologist sitting right behind me, as soon as the thing happened, she went and tapped Ricardo and said, look at your watch. Tell him, look at your watch, it's 9:33. And so I know Michael Sella had been involved. They had invited Michael Sella in 2013. Because the way this thing works, it's almost like the circus. So when it first happened in '74, Sixto Paz learns this automatic writing. They ask, how do we know we're talking to an alien? They said, go out Saturday night, we're going to fly by. At 8 o'clock. 8 o'clock, this thing goes flying by. So they all get hooked into this thing, and it comes down to this program sighting thing that they sort of prove it. So what happens with Ricardo is he brings in researchers. So Michael Sala went in 2013, and I couldn't just wait to get home to talk to Michael Sala. So I phoned him up and said, Michael, I had this thing, and I told him, you know, I got the message from Antarel, and I went there, and this thing is flashing over my head, and I said, I heard you were involved in 2013. He said, yeah, I had the same thing. Ricardo said, I heard you're coming, Antarel says you're coming, and we're going to have a sighting, and we're going to show Michael Sala. And I said, what happened? He said, sounds like what you saw, the flashing thing. He said it went by, and then he said, but I had an event at Shasta too this year. I said, oh really? When were you there? And he said, same weekend you were there. I said, what? You were here at the same time? And he was with the outer space...
Secret Space Program?
Secret Space Program. He's with all that whole group. So he's there, and I said, well, where were you? He said, I was on the south side of the mountain. We were on the east side of the mountain. And he said, I had a sighting, I had an event, and I said, well, what happened? And he said, I'm with this guy, and we're actually walking towards Shasta. They're walking east towards the east side of the mountain. They're walking along, and they're in this forest. And he said, all of a sudden, there's this curtain of light, which is one of the ways Sixto describes a Xendra. And he said it was like a curtain. You could see exactly where it was, and you could see like the sparkles of the light, and it was coming through this forest. And they looked at it, and he said it was 100 meters long, and they walked through it, and they were sort of looking at this thing, and then they walked back out again, and then he was so mystified, he went to his wife and he said, I can't believe what I saw this morning. And then the next morning, the next 2 mornings, he went and he couldn't find the path. He couldn't even find the path where they had gone. And so I said, well, I'll document 2013, Sala sees it. 2014, Paula has this Xendra experience. 2015, 2016, and what happens is 2017 is mine, so it has this flashing thing. But during the day before this event happened Saturday night, I take Paula out. She shows me the thing. I'm filming the whole thing, and then she says, "Oh, most of the other people are here." I said, "Really? Can we go talk to them?" And we go, and they're all sitting in one group. That's sort of like the inside Ricardo guys that usually get picked to go to the Xendra, and they're all sitting there, and they can see me coming with the camera. They just scatter. Nobody wants to go on camera, and it's not because they don't really want to talk, but because they don't speak English very well. So I go, and Raimundo, and I'm talking to Raimundo, and he's telling what he saw, and it was the same thing. I went from person to person with this movie camera, and I said, "Did you see this? Did you see Antarel?" "Oh yeah, I saw him." And then I'd say, the one woman I said, "So did it affect your life?" "Oh yeah, I cried for 2 days. I cried for 2 days the first time I saw him." And they're very broken English, and they're like, some of them wouldn't go on camera because of their English or whatever. And then I asked like Raimundo, and because we were talking about what they'd seen in him putting his hand up, and he's like 10 feet tall, and he's got this sort of a thing around his chest like a
medallion.
What's that?
Medallion.
Medallion. And it's got sparks coming off it. And all these people describe this sparks coming off this sort of medallion thing, and these shorter beings beside him. In 2014, he appeared to be solid. In 2015, he was like a hologram. You could see through him, you could see the tree. And yet, Julio said he saw him, he was solid. But most of the other people said they saw sort of a hologram. And then they saw these small beings that had big heads. And of course, they always questioned, well, are they grays? And they all said, no, they weren't grays. But they were peeking out behind the trees. And the one woman, Raimundo's girlfriend, said it looked like they had iPads. They were walking around these iPads, and so they got the idea that they were technicians, that they were the ones that were building the Xendra and holding the Xendra together, so they had these iPads. But they were looking out, and they were sort of smiling, and they were poking out behind these trees. And all these people described these little beings that were moving around sort of closer to them. And so I was floored. So I asked Raimundo, I says, Paula was pretty upset about this. Were you scared? He goes, no, I wasn't scared. And I've seen him before. I said, oh, you've seen him before? And he said, yeah, I've seen him before. I said, well, how many times have you seen him? I said, I don't know, 5 times, maybe more. I said, what? I couldn't believe it. And then now I found out that a lot of these people have seen, because what they do is they follow him around. He goes to Spain, he goes to Siberia, he goes to the Chilca Desert in Chile, and they do all these things. And some of these people they'll go to these events around the world. And so a lot of them have been in these Xendras. So I figure, oh, I'll put all these years together. I'm coming especially the synchronicities was sort of like just coming together. I had all these people on camera now, and they're all confirming, yes, I was in there with Paula, and the one woman confirms that Paula disappeared. Paula said, I did not disappear. The woman is saying, I looked around and Paula was gone, because she was standing right beside her. She said she just disappeared for a couple of minutes. And so I was going to put this all together. So I'm coming down the hill, going towards where we were camping, and this woman comes up, because I had spoken a little bit in front of the group, so the woman comes up, she says, well, thank you for speaking. She says, I got a weird story. I said, oh, really? I got a camera. Would you tell me it on camera? She said, you do that? I said, yeah, stand right there. And I turn the camera on, and she's from Mexico. And this is like, these are people that have no intention of being interviewed. I'm the first person to show up with a camera, and they're just there to meditate, to save the world. You know, they're praying for world peace. So she says, I'm from Mexico. In 2016, it was the only year I was missing that nothing had happened. So 2016. So she says, 2016. I said, oh, really? So what happened? She says, we come here, and there was some lights and stuff. She saw some lights, whatever. She says, but at the end, we go back down to Shasta, and they have these crystal shops in Shasta, the city of the town at the bottom of the hill. And she's in the crystal shop, and she's walking around outside. And there's an alien, Evika. There's Antarella is sort of the tall one, and Evika's shorter, but she's a female, and she's supposed to be the commander of the craft. And she's describing this woman that's Evika, and she said she's walking around the crystal shop, and all these people are just busy, and they're looking at crystals, and they're talking to each other, and nobody notices this huge woman walking around, and I said, Evika? And she said, oh, it had to be Evika. And then she went to her friend, and her friend is playing on her iPad, on her cell phone, and she's saying, come on, you gotta see this, you gotta see this woman. And then as soon as she brought her friend, the person was gone, so I said, well, I've got every year. Now, so that's the way I was gonna write it up, but then it just got weirder. It was sort of like, then suddenly I realized that this is not just these events. There was, we did the one yesterday where I heard that we were there in the middle of August, and then I heard this Sixto Paz. Now, he's the main guy. I mean, he's opened piles of these Xendras. And then we were just at the event, and we're waiting to go out there, want to go sky watching or whatever. So we're standing there, and Sixto comes with his jacket, and he looks at me and he says, oh, you get a dress? You can't wear that. And I said, my jacket's in the car, don't worry about it. And so we're sitting there waiting, and they start talking, and all of a sudden they announced that Sixto opened a Xendra the week after we were there. He was on Mount Shasta. What? You opened one? And then they said, opened one last year at Shasta. You opened one last year? And it's like, and that's what happened. It's suddenly I started to realize there's all these cases. Then I hear from Dr. Joe Burks, if anybody knows him. He's used to work with Dr. Stephen Greer. He's in San Francisco, he's an emergency room doctor. And he worked sort of with Greer and with sort of Project Rama. And I forgot what I was going to say. Oh yeah, he mentioned on one of his shows, we were talking about Xendras, and he said, oh yeah, they opened one. He mentions this doctor from Peru who escaped when the Civil War or whatever was going on there. He escaped. He was a dental surgeon. He came to California, and they got Joe Vallejo, who's he's flown 747s for United Airlines. And they opened a Xendra at Mount Shasta in 1994, where there was 49 people went through the Xendra. And I'm going, what, 49 people? So then I started doing this research. I'm going, man, this is a big story. There's all these, and I said, and I still say, it is, in 42 years, the best story. There's nothing comes close to this, because you've got witnesses. You've got all these witnesses. Because I posted some of these videos, and if you go to Whitehouse UFO, I posted some of these videos, and people would come up. I said, I wonder what they're going to do. Like, how do you, if you're a skeptic, what do you say? And the guy says, bullshit. And it was like, how long did you have to sit in your high chair to think of that one, you know? Like, that's it? What about the 10 witnesses? And it's like, oh, Paula wants to make money. And anybody who knows Paula Harris knows Paula Harris doesn't make a dime. Paula Harris loses money all the time. She's running these conferences, she does not make money. And then the thing that she's a contactee. So I don't respect her anymore, because now she's a contactee. And it's like, well, what about the other 9 witnesses? And there's 14, in 14 there's 9 witnesses, 10 witnesses, 15 there's 10 witnesses, 1994 there was 49 witnesses, and we started to track these people down. I said, I got to talk to these people. I mean, if I can get one that's 30 witnesses, I mean, this is amazing, where people will actually say, yeah, I was there, and this thing formed, and we went in this thing, and I got a message, and stuff like that. And then I'm looking for Sixto Paz, because he opened them all, and I find this lecture, and suddenly he has the one, I showed the video at Laughlin, he has one in Uruguay, and it's the same thing. They predict there's going to be a Xendra open, like months before, that there's going to open a Xendra, and there's a video, and they're standing on this person standing there, and they're on the edge of the ocean, and here's this thing, it looks like a rainbow, but it's really thick, and it's like that, and it's about 40 feet long, 30 feet high, and it's there for 2 days, and 125 people go through the Xendra. And we have the notes, we have these notes of all these people from Uruguay who start to report, and there's a website where these people are reporting. And the thing was, and I was saying to Sixto, I'm saying to him, I can't believe it, it's like I've been asleep. Man, how could you miss this story? I couldn't believe it. But because it's a Spanish story, it's all done in Spanish, and nobody's ever done the English, and no English person's ever tried to put it out. And all these contactees write their own books, so they write about their experiences, and they're the contactee, they're the Messiah, and they're the guy, whatever, and nobody's ever sort of put it together, that this phenomena that's going on in South America, that they're able to do this and actually produce these witnesses. So it's not like, you know, you have a story and you know, you have no witnesses, you have no film, because somebody said you've got film. And I said, yeah, there's film, there's video, there's pictures, there's all sorts of stuff. In fact, he was telling us, and this is just how amazing this thing gets. One of the stories we heard was that he had invited, over 40 years, 10 times he had invited reporters. So, of course, we got this chance to interview him. And so the question I asked him is, okay, you had these reporters 10 times over 40 years. Did something show up every time? Oh yeah, every time. And then he starts telling these stories. And he tells a story about, is it Mexico with the 40 reporters? They do this challenge. And they're at this, what's that place called?
Teotihuacan.
Okay, so they're at this place with the pyramids and stuff. And these reporters, all these 40 reporters show up, and they got their cameras, and they're all sitting there, and it's like they're making jokes. Okay, this fool's going to make a fool of himself, and they've got the exact time when this is going to happen. And they have 6 objects during the day. The stuff's flying around during the day, and they're all filming it, and almost none of them put it in the newspapers. But they all saw it, and he said there's actually the one video or something where the one guy's video, he's talking to the other guy, and he's saying, so what do you think? Oh shit, looks like this is for real. I mean, this guy's for real. And they're interviewing each other, but they never really put it. And then the one, and he's got these documents, that we'll actually get the documentation of these stories that appear in all these Latin things, where the Xendra appears, and there's a female reporter who actually goes into the Xendra and talks to the alien and gets the message and comes out and writes a full-page story on the front page of, I think, the #1 newspaper in Bolivia,
Lima, I think.
or Peru, Lima, Peru, or something. And it's a front page, and he shows the actual thing where this woman gets this thing, and he's describing these reporters coming, and there's all sorts of video that these people have this sort of stuff. And the thing is, the English-speaking world knows nothing about it. So we start going through this, and you realize this is like an absolutely massive story that involves a lot of things. Like it'll involve the antennas. Like I asked Dr. Joe Burks, because it seems to sound like CE5s, except it has the big difference is the antenna. That the CE5, what they do is they have this protocol where you go, you meditate, you sit in a field, you set up these lights, you set up these sounds that people have recorded around UFOs, and you try to attract the spaceship in. These are completely different. One guy has a bunch of people, antennas, who give him a message that say, at 9:33, this thing is going to fly by, and at 9:33, this thing flies by, and they seem to be able to hit it every time. So, to me, I started to gather it, and the more we went, the more bizarre the story got. Like, for example, 2017, we have this thing, and we saw the one orb thing go over. It flew over the other guy's camp. There was a Rama group across the road. And it was this sort of, it was almost becoming like religion. It was sort of like, this is our group, and that's that group, and this is like football teams, you know, like they're the bad guys, we're the good guys over here. And they're all meditating for world peace. It's the same thing, you know, and it's like, and I'm going, like, why would you have the same thing against this guy? Because this was the English group. So we were over here, and I was actually taking a picture of the group over there. I'm thinking, what are they doing over there? I wonder what they're doing. What's different and stuff? So we go there, and then the event happens. You see the light goes right over their camp. This one light, and we didn't know. People were just sitting there watching it, and you know, people weren't really determining if it was a UFO or not. And then there was the lights on the mountain, the red light and the blue light, or the red and the green light on the mountain. And they were there, and they were pretty bright. I clearly couldn't see them. Desta could see them better. There was a tree in the way. But so we were watching this sort of stuff, but it was when this flashing thing happened over my head, then everybody sort of interpreted, yes, this is the event, because it was just so bizarre. So it happens, and then because nobody wants to talk to the other group, this is like the bad guys over there, and I'm thinking, all I could think about was, I wonder what they saw on the other side. I wonder if they saw the flashing light, because there was 40 of them over there. So I contact this guy by the name of Enrique Villanueva, and I contacted him on Facebook, and I said, I just want to let you know, you guys were on the sand flat side, we were on the other side of the road, and I had this sighting. This thing happened, and I said, can you tell me what happened on your side of the road? And he sends me a 32-minute video. It's like science fiction. It's like, holy cow, they're doing all this thing with balls and tents lighting up and all this sort of stuff. And then we get to Laughlin, and they're waiting to go, 6 topazes there, and this Enrique guy comes up, who's across the road from us, and he's running, and they're doing actual protocols. They're going through these protocols that Six Topaz had developed in the 1970s on how to make this communication. So he shows up, and then we're waiting to go, and I'm talking to Sixto, and then Enrique starts to interpret. So then I says to Enrique, one of your guys, I talked to one of your guys that was across the road, and he said he saw aliens. And he says, oh yeah. I'm thinking, well, because this guy tells the story that he's sitting there and they're doing this whatever, and then he goes, and all of a sudden he thought there were trees, and then he looks and he sees big, tall aliens and these short aliens, and this is happening across the road from where we were sitting. And I'm thinking, so I said to Ricky, this Michael guy, he saw some aliens. He said, oh yeah, I did too. And I went, you did? And he said, yeah, I was sitting there and I had got this message, it would be 908. It's the antenna thing, and Enrique's an antenna. So he says 908, and he says he looked at his watch, it was 905, and they were going to do what's called a crystal ceremony, where they got these crystals, and the aliens sort of give this energy crystal thing, and you put them in your hands, and you wait, and they put them in your hands, and then you put your hands to your heart, and it's called like a crystal ceremony. It's almost like, say a baptism, or being confirmed in whatever. So they're doing this thing, and Enrique, he looks at his watch, it's 905, and he got this message 908. So 905, and he's looking around where they're going to do this crystal ceremony, and he's looking around in the forest where, and he catches this eye, on the side of his eye, he sees this light, and he looks, and there's this orb sitting just a couple feet away from him. And he goes, oh, okay, that's where we're supposed to be. They're giving me the message where to set up. So he turns to go to get the group to set up for this crystal ceremony. He turns around, and he says it looks like a woman on her knees against a tree, and she's got a hood on, and she's going like this, she's rocking back and forth. And he goes and he figures, he didn't mention what girl he thought it was. He thought it was one of the girls in the group. So he was going to go to help her, and he said, I was like, boom, she disappeared. And what? And he looked, and there's the aliens, tall aliens and small aliens, and then he looks at his watch, and it's 9:08. So this is happening across the road from me, and it's just like this bizarre, it just, you cannot even imagine. We did the